Welcome back to Epistemics. Today I am joined once again by our beloved brother Subboor Ahmad. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. What Islam means?
Peace be upon you.
Peace be upon you too. Okay, so I normally really like doing shows with you because they're probably the most relaxed shows. And they're enjoyable because I think we have a history. Going back to London Dawah Movement and Global Dawah Movement shows.
And other rubbish videos with that bridge camera.
Yeah, bridge cameras and everything back in the day, 5-6 years ago. So we're trying to make a little bit of a comeback with these videos because God willing, I hope that there's some benefit in this content for Muslims, but in particular, as I'm trying to channel this more primarily towards non-Muslims too. So hopefully they're watching this and they're benefiting. And if you guys are watching, if you have any comments, anything you want to ask, please do leave in the question section below, and we will address you the best we can. That being said, Subboor, today we're going to be talking about a interesting topic which sort of bridges the area I'm focusing on and the area you're focusing on, and it's that place where both worlds meet. And the topic, how did you say it? What did you call it? You called it existential.
So evolution, and human behavior, but in particular, what we're discussing today is, why do we ask these existential questions, these questions about purpose, meaning, values, morality? I mean, generally, these types of questions, the way that they are framed, on the very face of it, it doesn't actually make any sense from an evolutionary point of view. Okay. Now, if you try and get a deeper understanding of evolution and you try and explain those things away, it's still very difficult to make those two things match. And I think, that's a very interesting
I think that's a good place to start. So you're saying it doesn't make sense from an evolutionary perspective. What do you mean by that? So when you say from an evolutionary perspective, there's an assumption there that on evolution, or the way we understand it, it doesn't make sense to ask questions about existence, meaning, purpose, morality, X, Y, and Z. Why is that the case?
Sure. So let's look at the field of evolutionary psychology, which is the application of Darwinism to human behavior. This is known as sociobiology, and then it, now today it's known as formerly evolutionary psychology. And the thing about this field is it applies methodological adaptationism to human behavior.
Okay, you're going to have to define terms for us.
So our behavior has... It should be fitness enhancing. So fitness in terms of survival and reproductive capacity. So behaviors which are fitness enhancing, they would survive. Natural selection would obviously allow that. And behaviors which are, say, detrimental to your fitness, they should be weeded out.
Right. Okay.
So why that's needed from a naturalistic point of view is because from a naturalistic point of view, if you're an atheist, the only explanation you have for human behavior is Darwinism, right? Now, when you have a clear discrepancy between the way that human beings are supposed to behave and the way that we actually do behave, then that's obviously something which challenges the theory directly.
Yeah, so it's why is it that way? That's the question we're asking. So it's interesting. So put in layman terms, if I was to sort of summarize what you just said, what you're saying is that if we understand evolutionary biology, Darwinism, what you see is that there's a picture that emerges that we evolved to survive and reproduce. And if that is the case, then everything about our beings, including our behavior and the way we act out in life and what we do and the way we live, should be determined by those goals. If we can call them goals. But let's just stick with that for the sake of simplicity. And therefore, there are certain ways that we behave as human beings which are not in line with those base goals. So then the question arises as to how do we explain those behaviors?
So let's stick to the behavior of asking questions, existential questions about why we exist, what's the meaning of life, and these sort of questions. So the first thing is, if we are to note and document this type of behavior that people have, the first point that I think we'd agree about, and I think viewers would agree about it as well, is this is prevalent. All human societies throughout time, you had thinkers, philosophers, writers, artists, poets talking about why do we exist, what's the purpose of our life, and these types of things. So the first point is it's prevalent. I think that's
important. If you look at the literature, the whole field of philosophy over the past even 200-300 years, the whole debates between essentialism and existentialism, about purpose. Do we come into this world with purpose, or do we come into this world without purpose, or create it? Does essence precede existence, or is it the other way around? So this has been a huge main bedrock topic of philosophy itself, and generally thinkers, whether it be religious or non-religious, it's a big thing for humanity.
And the thing is, look, if you look at all human beings, and if you take a snapshot of the earth right now, so there's somebody who is doing shopping, there is somebody who is teaching their children, there is somebody who is doing whatever action. There's all these actions happening around the world. And a lot of these actions are driven by desires. So, for example, the desire for knowledge, the desire for lust, whatever, right? You get all these types of desires. However, if you're to stop a person in their tracks and just say, look, I just need 10 seconds of your time. Just 10 seconds of your time. And you literally, in those 10 seconds, you remind them, whatever activity you're involved in right now, you didn't exist at a point, and there's going to come a time 100 years from now where you will not exist. And your memories, your perception, your dreams, your passions, everything will be gone. And you just remind them about that existential reality that you are here. Imagine there's a Sahara Desert and there's all these grains, trillions of grains of sand. You're just that one pathetic little speck in this vast. And there's human beings who existed before you, human beings who existed after you. So if you just remind a person about that, their lust, their desires, everything is dampened. And as we know through a narration of the Prophet, peace be upon him, that, paraphrasing here, but death, a reminder about death destroys,
absolutely.
Desires. I'm paraphrasing, right? So that's very, very important, that it has such an impact on human beings. So how do we explain it?
So you're right. So what you're essentially saying is that we strive for purpose. We strive for meaning as human beings. We're looking for it. This is almost an inbuilt driving factor for our existence. This is what we go by. But the question now arises, in the absence of finding our purpose and meaning to life, it leads to, in some cases, a crisis, anxiety, depression. It's very fundamental to the human being. Now, what intrigues me is that if we were created to survive, or we had evolved to survive and reproduce, full stop, then why would we end up with the abilities, mental faculties, cognitive faculties, whatever you want to call them, which allow us to ask questions and engage in a type of thought or thinking, which leads to depression and anxiety and these types of things, which in the long term, what they do is they result in the opposite of survival and reproduction.
Absolutely.
Because when you're anxious and you're depressed and you're asking those deep fundamental questions to life and you don't want to do anything, then you're not really surviving or reproducing. If anything, it's the opposite of that now. So why would we end up with these right abilities? If anything, if we were just here to survive and reproduce, then like we said, everything about your being, your mind, your faculties should be geared towards survival and reproduction. We shouldn't even have the ability to ask these questions and engage in this type of thought. So what would the response be to something like this?
So
this
when
question?
It comes to things which cannot be explained via natural selection, there are various ways that Darwinists try and explain that away. So they'll say it's a trade-off between two selective pressures, or it's not due to...
But let me just pause you there. When they try to explain this away, is this based on some sort of data, or is this just what you would call
storytelling?
So
the thing is, this is a big question, because when you watch a program about human psychology or even biological features we have, you normally are told a coherent account which is consistent with natural selection. So this thing evolved because of this. However, there was this selective pressure, so there was a trade-off, so it wasn't optimal, so it became suboptimal, and therefore we have this deficiency. The thing with that is that these accounts, and this isn't due to say scientific evidence. This is due to a priori adherence to materialism. That look, this is the best account we have. We have this, so it's kind of like me and you playing Cluedo, right? So we're trying to work out who committed the murder. Was it the butler? Was it the maid? Was it this? Was it that? However, before we play the game. We already decide the butler did the murder. It's just a given. Then every piece of data is reverse engineered to fit that.
Right.
So when it comes to Darwinism's an absolute reality that they accept a priori. They just accept it.
Right. Okay.
Now, since they accept it, whatever piece of data comes which is in line with our survival, they say, see, there you go, natural selection. What is not, they will first try and explain it as a maybe it's due to natural selection. We haven't understood how this aids our survival. When it clearly doesn't, then it's like it must be a trade-off. It must be a runaway evolutionary process.
So what you're saying is that this particular theory has almost become like a black hole which absorbs every possible counter evidence to it in some way, shape, or form. It just absorbs it in and it keeps moving.
Basically, it will explain why we focus so much on goals. It will also explain why some people are lazy. It's just a universal filler. It'll just fit everywhere. The problem with that is it's not really testable.
Yeah. Now, see, here's the thing. Let's just press a bit more on that point that we raised earlier. Let's take that understanding. Now, if they can't explain it, what they would do is they'll say it was a trade-off. Right. Let's sort of let me just probe you on that a bit, because if you go down that line now, when you're talking about having the ability to ask questions about purpose on such a worldview and try to even understand what that means, but purpose and meaning and value, and in the absence of finding answers, it leading to depression and maybe anxiety, and maybe not these two things, but maybe just a general type of angst or a type of sorrow, whatever it is,
or you're trying to escape it,
whatever it is which will move you away from surviving and reproducing. Now we're talking about something which is not, forget trade-off, we're talking about the opposite direction, which completely defeats the purpose of surviving and reproductions. What would they do in this case now? Isn't that a bigger problem than just saying, okay, we're just gonna explain it as a trade-off?
Okay, so there's a very clear issue here, and the issue is that if you've already decided this is true, it is undisputable, this is the truth, then you will have to make the data fit, and you can always give a naturalistic account. You can say, well, this was supposed to happen, but maybe this happened now. So it's very important for us to make a distinction between scientific evidence and accounts which sound scientific, but they're just plausible stories. There's a difference between what theoretically could have happened and what actually happened. And what they're doing in these cases is they're just giving you a theoretical possibility, but the way it sounds is it sounds like scientific evidence. Now, look, we both agree, and I think the viewers would too, that every human being, it is important for us. Why do we exist? What is the purpose of life? And when we are told these pathetic answers, like, Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene, who says the ultimate rationale for our existence is the preservation of our genes. That is the ultimate rationale. Now, when we hear that as an answer, we're like, that's pathetic.
But
I don't accept
but that shouldn't be the case. We should feel like,
that's
amazing.
That's amazing.
That is perfect.
That's perfect.
Purpose.
Makes perfect sense.
Absolutely.
That's what we're there
That's
for.
what should happen.
That's what should happen.
Yeah.
But we don't. And the reason why we don't is because we deep down know this is nonsense. This is nonsense. I mean, I was talking to somebody who used to be an atheist. And they said something very, very powerful. They said even when they were an atheist, questions like, why do I exist? What's happening after I'm going to die? You cannot put them on the back burner. You can keep trying to push them away, but they will always be there.
Absolutely.
Now, the answers given by atheism, naturalism, is it will not fit with the human
what
being.
surprises me is that the innate need to find purpose is so intense in the human being. Even atheists, okay, they can't account for objective or ultimate purpose on their worldview, but they will go to the point of saying, okay, let's just make a purpose for ourselves.
Or let's just keep finding it.
Or create it, right? And that's very interesting. That just shows how deep and powerful that desire is to find purpose. And it when it doesn't match up with what we're told from the perspective of how we came to be on this planet, I think there's something that should raise questions inside people, right? And they should really sort of now...
And also consider this, right? If we are a product of a blind naturalistic process, we are a Darwinian product, then us doing something other than what was designed by natural selection should not work.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about pragmatically what works. However, look at the Islamic purpose of life. Our purpose is to worship God.
Yep.
Worship meaning everything we do,
Yes.
charity we give, smiles we give, every part of our human behavior we can do towards God.
Yes.
Right? So we love, hope, and fear, and all these emotions are for God as well. Now, Muslims who practice their religion in this with this spiritual understanding, they're happy.
Yes.
They're happy people.
Yeah.
Now, if they are happy and they are content with that, now it doesn't matter whether you believe Islam is false or true. Why would that be the case? Why would they be content?
Yeah.
When, if we are the product of natural selection, we're doing something which is detrimental for that.
Yeah.
In fact, natural selection should make us unhappy
Yeah.
if we are focusing our lives,
Yes.
not for the sake of survival and reproduction, but to worship a creator which is unseen,
Yeah.
to give charity to strangers, which doesn't benefit us, right? All these types of actions which Islam teaches you, like the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, love for others what you love for yourself.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So loving for others what you love for yourself, this doesn't make sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Yeah.
Richard Dawkins in The Selfish Gene, he's a very good writer. You can't deny that.
Yes.
As much disagreements as we have with him, he's a fantastic writer. And he just says this idea of universal love, it doesn't make any evolutionary sense.
He's being honest. And this
And he says we have to teach
Yeah.
altruism because we were born selfish.
And that just brings a point to mind. What's fascinating is it seems like when we look at what's going on here, that if anything, human beings were designed to thrive off worshipping God, because that's what the proof or the evidence, at least on an individual level, for that is the experience when they do this, how it results in the way they feel, right? And that they feel peaceful and they feel content and they feel like they're fulfilling their purpose, and that we weren't designed to thrive off survival and reproduction. That's what it seems like is going on, and that is a big contradiction or problem there. Just to wrap up, right? Because we're running out of time pretty much, but I think it's a very interesting topic. Maybe we can elaborate on certain aspects later on. If you were an atheist that's watching this show right now, right? What would you tell them? Where could they, what, if they realize, okay, there is this disparity, something is not adding up, based on the account that I'm being told about my evolution and my development as a human being, but my life itself, my actual real existence, the way I feel and the way I look for purpose and the way I look for meaning in my life, where would you direct them? What would you advise them to do?
So look, the first thing is we live in a post-truth time, right? It doesn't matter what is true, what is false. It matters what is popular. Young people today are confused. We have some people who believe the earth is flat and they're taking, there's this movement. There's all this type of nonsense that is happening, right? And it's very hard to trust anyone today. So, an atheist may watch a video of Christopher Hitchens doing his famous Hitch slap and feel, atheism's right. But then they see a Christian speaking about the love of Jesus and it's changed their life. And they're like, oh, maybe there's something there. They watch this and they're kind of like, okay, that doesn't really make sense from an evolutionary perspective. What am I doing? My personal advice would be, whoever you are, God knew you before you were born.
Yes.
And he knows where you're going to be buried. He knows what time you're going to pass away. He knows what time you were born. There's nobody who knows you better than God. Even if your belief in God is like doubtful. You're like, maybe there is a God, maybe there isn't. My advice would be, God would never deceive you. Human beings can. I can deceive you. We can deceive each other. God would not deceive you. So sincerely pray to God for guidance. Say, look, if this is the truth, please guide me. And you will see that God, he will direct you towards what is true. But what is required is for you to actually sincerely want that guidance. Now you get some very arrogant type atheists. Oh, I prayed to God, didn't get an answer. I didn't see lightning striking the mountain, or I didn't see the stars realigning to say Muhammad is the messenger of God, or I didn't see this miracle, that miracle. Fact is this: God says in the Quran, we shall show them our signs within the horizons and within themselves until they know this is the truth. if a person sincerely asks for guidance, whoever you are, you will see signs in your life which for you are equivalent of the moon splitting.
Absolutely.
For everybody else, it may not mean anything,
Yeah.
but for you, it's absolutely crystal clear.
Yeah.
And that guidance that God will give you in your heart, there is no rational argument that you can make to give you that level of certainty. That comes directly from God. That is the guidance of God.
Absolutely, bro. And what's required for that is people to, you know, take a step back and first humble themselves, be honest and sincere, and then really open their minds. And people are intelligent and rational these days. I'm sure they're waking up to this whole new atheist movement, and they're seeing the fluff that's there as well. And they're actually looking forward and looking for alternatives, and they're really questioning things. So be honest, be sincere. Ask. There's no harm in asking God for guidance, even if you don't believe. Just ask. Nothing to lose,
absolutely.
right? And I'm sure if you do that, you would find the truth. And on top of it, like you mentioned, and one of the things we mentioned today, there's dots that are already there in your life, but you just need to step back and try to connect those dots. And this was one major dot that we mentioned today. That's just that need to find purpose and meaning, and it seems to be that the answer to that question or those questions is the opposite of what we find in the field of Darwinian evolution. It just doesn't. It seems to be the opposite, and that should be a sign for us, right, to question things further. But I think we can conclude there, bro. Thank you for coming on the show. Hopefully, you guys have found this beneficial. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to click the notification bell. And until next time, take care.